Does anyone know?
Hey, welcome along to another Tuesday evening. One day we'll get someone else come and join us, but tonight we've got Rod and Kylie with us as always, and whoever's watching at another time. I think I mentioned last week that I was into a new Andy Root book. So
Yes.
here it is. When Church Stops Working. Is that backwards for you or the right way around?
Correct.
Good.
Correct. Okay.
We can read it.
Just looks backwards for me. So by Andrew Root and Blair D. Bertrand, who is apparently a colleague of his who's sort of read and edited or read through and commented on most of his books. So there you go. So the byline, whatever you call that thing, is a future for your congregation beyond more money, programs, and innovation. So they suggest that, there's a diagnosis that most of us have of what's wrong with the church, that we struggle with the problem of too little influence, too few people, and too fragile belief. So we're losing people, we're losing our sort of standing in society, and we're losing, people believing what we believe. And so, we need to turn that around and change that, is the thinking. And the common answer to that is to be more effective. Trying to find, I looked a second ago and found where I wanted, and then it's completely gone out. So we want to be more effective so we get more resources and more things. Maybe it's over here. So we have more resources, more people. We can then use them more effectively. Here we go. The cure is to be more effective and therefore increase resources while using them efficiently. Coupled with effectiveness is a drive for innovation. So how many times have we heard that we must creatively meet the needs of the surrounding community? The solution is the right balance of resource management and effective innovation, which makes our church grow sustainably. So that's what they suggest is the common idea of that's the problem out in the church. We've got reducing numbers, we've got reducing resources, reducing budgets and all that. So we just need to get more people in, more resources, be more innovative, and more people will come in if we're doing new things. Does that sound like a common diagnosis and sort of solution that you've heard out there?
Haven't we achieved that yet?
Haven't we achieved that yet? No.
Could I just go back at the very beginning? You mentioned, I thought, three things. Innovation was the last one. Was it money, programs, and innovation? Three things.
So
and that moved on to the effectiveness, but yep.
As in the problems were too little influence, too few people, and too fragile belief. And then I might have mentioned some of those as I was trying to remember and find the bit that I was looking for. So yeah, it's about.
I think it was before those ones. You mentioned money, programs, and I thought innovation.
Okay.
But maybe not. Because I was just going to pick up how those, because I can see those are the things that, yes, we always worry about having money. Have we got the right programs? But I didn't think innovation was a worry. It was we have to do.
It's the answer to that. Yep. Cool. So that's often what we hear as church. Oh, we've got this problem of decline. We need to innovate and do something. Which they suggest is part of the sort of secular age that we live in, that it's about getting busy and you get more and more busy. And so we've got declining, let's put more programs on. Let's do more innovative programs and all these sorts of things. And they suggest that the real problem is that that's the wrong diagnosis. That that's not actually the problem that the church is facing. But the church is facing the sense that we live in what they refer to and what Charles Taylor refers to as a secular age. So Charles Taylor wrote this massive book called A Secular Age, where he talked about, and I think we've talked about before, he sort of goes, well, hang on, if you go back to the 1500s, it was, impossible to think there wasn't a God, pretty much. Like there was one or two, but that was basically it. Now we've come to a stage where, it's almost, people look at you as if you're an idiot if you believe in God. How did we get from one to the other? And Charles Taylor follows that through and suggests this move to secular age. So that sense, Andy Root and Blair Bertrand suggest our problem really is that we live in this secular age. And so that means we need to change how we're doing. And they suggest 3 symptoms, yes, of the secular age. So symptom number 1 is a sense that the church and Christianity have less influence in society than they once did. So we can see that. There's that symptom that we're all aware of. Hang on, we've got less influence into society. We used to be the main part of culture. Everyone came to church, all those sorts of things. Symptom, and so the cause of symptom 1 is that secular no longer sets the agenda for our society. So you've got a divide between secular and sacred. So you've got this divide. We used to have, the church was all apart, and that sense of, and if you go to some countries, religion and state are sort of integrated. You can't talk about one without the other. Now very much it's part of the secular age is it's divided. You don't, and you hear that in sort of political arguments. Now, we don't want to know what your faith is. Don't bring your faith into affect your politics. Symptom number 2 follows on from this. Symptom 2 divides public and the private, leading to fewer people in church. Survey after survey tells us what we already know, fewer people are going to church. So we've got the rise of the nuns that have no religion. So that sense of you divide between the public. I
thought you meant those people that wear black and white.
Sorry,
the nuns. I thought,
not the N-U-N, but the N-O-N-E.
N-O-N-E, yep.
Yep. And so that sense of, faith has become very private, and faith is about me. So I don't have to go to church. If faith is all private, then there's no reason to go to church. So he says, if society can go along just fine without a sacred foundation, murder is still murder, whether or not I believe in the 10 Commandments. It becomes optional for me to take part in religion. My motivation for going to church changes from participation in a public profession of faith to participation in a private experience. Perhaps I go because I have strong personal beliefs about a moral cause, think abortion, or how society should be, think Black Lives Matter. And the church can help that. So that sense of I'm going to church because they're doing the things that I believe in, not because I want to go to church. And I guess you can see that in that sense in the church of, well, I'll go if you're doing what I want. But if you start to not do what I want, then I'll whinge and I'll go to some other church, whatever.
Yep.
So we see that, and that's part of the public personal divide, and we've moved religion into the private. Whereas, worship is meant to be, this public thing. Symptom number 3, kind of dominations coupled with the explosion of the denominational churches points to the fact that people have a very wide range of beliefs. So at one point, if you were a Presbyterian or a Lutheran or a Methodist, it meant that you believed certain things about God. There might have been differences in belief between denominations that played out in how they organised and worshipped, but now you can walk into 2 churches of the same denomination and you might think that they have nothing in common. So that division of belief, that ability to not believe in God. Symptom 3 goes deep to the core. It is now possible to not believe in God. The idea that a person could believe that there is no God goes beyond simple atheism. And so it's that loss of the immanent that they like to talk about. So they suggest we've got this divide between this secular and sacred, that these two have divided off, and we don't like them mixing anymore. We've got a divide between the public and private. I do my faith in private. It's not a public thing. So I go to church because it meets some needs, not because I'm going to worship with others. And our belief is sort of more open, so that, and we could all name uniting churches around us that look very different to Southside. And
Probably name 4 different churches within Southside too at one stage.
we could, yes, to some degree. We've
At
got
one stage, yep.
Yeah, yes. And so there, with the loss of the immanent and stuff like that, they actually suggest that maybe the solution is to stop and to wait and to listen to God. And that the crisis isn't actually about the loss of people. The crisis is that we follow this God who is far greater than we can imagine, and that God is at work, and we need to see where God is at work. And so instead of doing more and trying to innovate and all the things that the normal response is, how do we actually stop and we listen to God and hear where God is leading us? What are your responses to that?
That I would have said the work that has been done in Southside over the last 2.5, 3 years, all would probably claim we have and now we are doing, which may be not correct, but it's consistent with what what's his name is saying here. But one might question, have we stopped enough, listened enough, and watched him work? There's various times throughout what we have done where we have thought we have done that. And I guess in the particularly public side of the new ministries, that was a technique that was certainly being used and being stated as being used and being shown to being used, that we are not doing anything just yet. We are going out, we are looking, we are learning, we are trying to understand. May not be exactly that, but to me, that's one example of, we think we have done that. Stop and look at what God's doing rather than try and innovate now. Maybe we haven't done it very well. Maybe we really haven't done it. We just thought we were stopping. We thought we were looking, and we were just subconsciously bringing forward all of our ideas. I'm not sure where any of those stand, but that is certainly something that statement raises a question for me.
Yep.
Because I think that we have, or we think that we have done that. Always that question, have you done it effectively, and all those sorts of words.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the new missions, the MEG stuff that Jock's done, yes, that process was aimed at being that, how do we listen to our community, how do we listen to God and find, and that was a long process to working out the new friends stuff that is back going and working well. So yes, I guess there's an example of where we've gone, let's slow down and listen. Any comments, Kylie?
This is being recorded, Kylie.
No, like I didn't have any because it just went through my head. But then just something Rod said, that stopping is sometimes scary.
Yep.
And like the doing it yourself kind of comes out of fear of we've got to fill the gaps. We can't have a quiet second at all. So it's like a conversation where you've just got to fill the gaps. We just fill it with activities. But that whole it's okay to be quiet even for a long period of time. But then it's who are you hearing? And like, what if I hear something completely different to Rod? We both think we're hearing God, but we're both, so maybe we can do both, but different people do both. I don't know. But yeah, there you go. I've got something to say.
Yes, and it's that dilemma for us, and I think partly the way our culture has formed us that, yes, we go, well, how do I know and that I'm hearing the right thing? And I think also the good Protestant work ethic is, well, you can't, taking time to be silent and to listen, that's not productive. You meant Protestant work ethic got us to be productive and stuff like that. So, if I take time.
We do that for the minute during prayer on Sunday night, Richard.
That's right.
That 1 minute is our stop and listen.
That's right. That moment where we go, feel free to pray for anything you want.
Yeah, and the silence. That's right. It's the minute.
Okay, well, I'll just do it myself.
Yeah.
But yes, and I guess for me, that's one of the reasons why we've tried the reflective space. Like to some degree, it's going against the idea of, we've started a new program. But it's that deliberate, how do we allow people space to discover God and to stop and to meet with God? So that's why, for me, it's let's keep pushing that on, even though, we haven't been flooded with people coming in to that space. Well, can we allow that space for those few, and then maybe those few tell others, and that starts to grow, and it becomes that space for people to stop and encounter God. So let me move on to something they said that I was thinking we might do this next week, but let's do it now. So they draw on Acts, and they say generally when we look at Acts 2 is when we say the church starts. The Holy Spirit comes, Peter gets up, boom, 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 it's all action. And they say, well, what if we actually said that the church starts in Acts 1? And Jesus is with the disciples and he says, I'm going to heaven, go and wait in Jerusalem. And so the first command of the church is to wait. And then they point out that they go back, and of course, Peter can't wait, so they do the administrative thing of, well, we've only got 11, we need to fill a gap, so let's work out who's going to fill that gap. So thus we have the first church administrative meeting, and they choose Mattathias, who interestingly does not appear in the rest of the book. So that sense of they go into action, we've got to fill, let's pick someone else. And Andy Root and Blair suggest, what if actually God chooses that other person, and that other person is actually Paul? And that the most of Acts is about that story of Paul, because he's that 12th person that comes in. That the church got busy, went, we've got to wait, we've got to find someone else, we'll fill the gap. Yeah, they did, but that wasn't really who God wanted, and God eventually calls that. And so, that sense of, what if the church actually, instead of starting in busyness, starts with waiting? And so therefore, again, there's that model for us of how do we stop and we wait? And that just blew my mind, because then, you stop and you think through the rest of Acts, and you go, well, how does Peter meet with Cornelius? Well, he's up on a roof having his midday nap, and he has this vision. And how does, Paul, when they're going, on their second missionary journey, we wanted to go there, but the Spirit stopped us. And we wanted to go there, but the Spirit stopped us. And then a man from Macedonia came and said, come with us. And so these things of, we keep seeing moments when people stop and God works in, and moments where people are trying to be active and God says, no, just stop, just wait.
And didn't Saul, when he became Paul, have to wait at the person's house?
Yep.
At the beginning of his
house.
Yep. So he gets blinded, and then he sort of drops out for a little bit. He goes back to Tarsus or somewhere, or ends up back in Tarsus, and Barnabas has to go and grab him and bring him back, sort of thing, and say, hey, I actually want to come, you to come and engage in Antioch. So yes, he has a time of waiting and silence. And so, yeah, and like that just, yes. One of those things where you're reading and go, oh, this is totally new way of reading this book of Acts. And so they suggest maybe, we call it the Acts of the Apostles. And they say maybe we should call it the Acts of God. But actually, this is the story of God at work through the apostles. I think actually, and they suggest that's part of the problem, that we move the sort of main character from God to the church. And that can be our problem even today. We go, oh, the focus is on the church, and the focus is on God. So how do we get that balance right? What do you think of all of that? Am I just blowing your minds, or?
It's a nice, interesting statement. Until you mentioned that Paul is the 12th one, I was just wondering whether it was Peter, but stuffed things up by not doing as he said.
Yes.
But then, as you said, if Paul is the 12th, if God then has chosen that, if we consider that, and all this is, how do we look at things? We consider that Paul is the 12th and he corrected the outcome.
Yep.
Made the effective mission. Most of the Bible is what Paul did. Most of the New Testament is what Paul's done.
Yep.
Maybe he was not number 12, number 1, just at the end.
Yes.
Because,
even when we mess up, God can still get it right on track. And
yes.
Sorry, you were going to say, then I interrupted.
And I was going to say, maybe Collie, if you've got something to say, because there was something else I wanted to bring back from the earlier conversation, but I can't think of it at the moment. I know one reflection as you were going through, and when Andy Root and the other fellow were saying, take the time, I'm just thinking how I know it was they are different purposes, but looking at canoeing the mountains, it seems almost, don't stop, think on your feet, get going. But that's talking leadership wise, not necessarily what you're doing wise, but it just seemed the contrary. I go, wow. And you go on.
But one of the bits I was reading today was talking about, churches are all about mission statements and stuff like this. And maybe, mission statements have their space, but maybe we need like a watchword, which is sort of that reminder of who God is or something like that. I thought, that sort of goes against canoeing the mountains, where it's all about mission and we need this statement.
Yes.
So yes, to some degree that there's this
need to whatever bit is the right bit for you.
Yes.
And there's different roles, It is talking leadership, canoeing the mountains.
Yes.
This is talking, I guess, the church as a whole, how we all should be reacting.
Yep.
And that's probably what I was going to say is initially when you were talking about, what is it called, the secular world, the change since 1500 to now is, I don't go to church because I'm expected to. Well, I probably do. People do at times, but you always did it. And even through the 1800s and 1900s, lots of things you would hear would be, I go to church because it's a done thing to do.
Yes. Rather
than because there's a reason I'm doing it, and that may be challenging. Now, I was going through some parts of canoeing, some much earlier parts canoeing the mountain today, and one of the things there was challenging me as to what it is that we want of a church, trying to compare that to what it was that Lewis and Clark were doing to go across the mountain. Why were they doing that? Why do we want this church to come together and to move forward, not knowing where forward is? And I was struggling with some of those things. And I guess that was also what was coming out here, is I was only thinking of the people that are currently there.
Yep.
What about the the one extra or the 10 times extra people that could be there if church was the way it was? How do we include them into what church should be today, which maybe they're not there in church as such, but they're in that environment that says they are the church. It's just not defining the church as being the bricks and mortar that are there, but they still consider themselves part of the church. Or do they just consider themselves having a singular one-to-one relationship with God, which I guess is very much the Protestant perspective, that your relationship is important, and therefore we can boil it down to, I don't need to come along on Sunday, save my money and do something else, long as I feel that I'm still in touch with or doing the right thing. And I like that reference to, you don't need the church to tell you, but murder is still murder, whether it's 10 commandments or a list of 20,000 rules a government came up with. It's still the same thing in comparison. Yep. Yes. Just remember how it got there. It got into those rules because it was looked at that way.
Yes. And yeah, we need to be open to who are those people we're going to meet along the way, who are the Sacagist way or whatever her name was, that we might meet on the way and that might lead us in different journeys. And I guess, and part of what Canoeing the Mountains is talking about, and again, this book is talking about, for us, is that sense of not just why does Southside come together, but that knowledge of whether we're together as Southside or whether we were 4 individual congregations, the way we do church needs to change. So, yes, that part of the conversation remains the same, whether we're together or not. Obviously, we have the added challenge of we're 4 coming together. What does that mean? But yes. Cool. We better let you go to Bible study. We were going to finish early, but we didn't.
Already. Yep.
We just went in. Have a good week, everybody. We'll see you around.